Hey, Fruitvania here. I'm going to do a deck tech on my Wild and Blood deck. Go over the basics of the deck real quick and then play it against a couple AI opponents first to make sure it's going to play out properly. Once we get the good gold fishing tools that they're supposed to give us for the beta and possibly the release, it'll be a little bit easier, but at this point in time it gives us a lot of practice with the deck to make sure we don't have any holes in our resources or in our mana curve. Let's go over the deck real quick and I'll show you what I have with the deck. I'm starting with the blood side. I made sure that's going to be my removal part of my deck. So I started with 4 copies of Murder, which is a 3-drop with 2 threshold for his target troop. I have 4 Life Siphons, which is a cost of X, and that X, you deal that damage to the target opposing champion. You gain 1 health for each damage dealt that way. I also put 4 Extinction in, that way we can wipe the board. This is imperative with this deck in case we are running behind or slow. This allows them to ramp out some of their cards, but us wipe the board before we get our big baddies out there, so that's kind of essential with this deck as well. And lastly, with the blood cards, I put Curse of Oblivion in there. It's a 3-drop with 1 threshold. It allows us to look at the champion's deck and choose the non-resource card. Void it in each other card with the same name from their deck. I put this in there because we do have big bad creatures, and that's kind of our basic win con. And we want to make sure that we get their biggest win con out of their deck, or maybe some counters or removals that we can't deal with. That way we are able to get in and do our damage without being hindered. So that takes care of the blood cards there. The wild cards, I started off with the Howling Brave, which is usually staple in any wild deck because it gives us some ramp in our resources. Because it gains us 1 temporary resource whenever we tap them, or exhaust them, I'm sorry. It only costs 1 and gives us a threshold as well each time he comes in. So if he gets bounced, he also gives us an additional threshold. So usually on turn 1, we put a threshold out, play him, and now we have 2 wild thresholds. So that's usually a great card to play on turn 1. My turn 2 ideal play is Munaru Sensei. He's a 2-drop. When he comes into play, we get to draw a card. Drawing cards is good as well because that allows us to make sure we get our big cards in our hand early and not waiting to draw them, as well as get the card we're looking for next, which is our Chlorophylla. The 3-drop, most importantly though, gains us 2 threshold and also 2 permanent resources. This is huge for our ramp deck and allows us to get our big, large costing creatures out on the board at an early stage. Our 4-drop, so we have another 3-drop. We have the Wild Root Dancer, which tends to be another staple for the wild decks. This allows you to give another target troop +2/+2 whenever you play a resource when Wild Root Dancer is on the board. It's not usually used for attacking or anything like that. And he's got 2 defense, so he likes to stay there for a little while at least, but he's usually used to ramp other creatures. Our 4-drop is Honeycap. This is a common that I love playing in a wild deck, especially if I'm ramping like I am, because as he enters play, his attack and defense is equal to the number of wild thresholds you have. So as you saw with the Howling Brave, who gives additional threshold, the Chlorophylla will give us 2 additional threshold. He tends to get really big really quick. So yes, he's susceptible to any kind of murder or removal, which is probably why he's a common, but usually I can get him out there as a 6/6, 7/7, or 8/8 fairly early. So that brings us on to our 2 big bad creatures we love to put on the board. First one's our Battle Beetle, which is a 6-drop for 2 threshold. He's a 5/5, and for 2 resources he gets Flight this turn. I have put the Rage 1 gem in him. Mainly because when he comes out there, if he gets to attack, he'll actually go 6 and 7 before he gets removed from the board, or it makes him an easy target. That way I can get this guy on there. And that's Fist of Brigadon. Is a 6 and costs all 6 have to be the wild threshold. He has to attack each turn if available. The thing about him though is he's invincible, so he's a huge target for your counter spells when he comes into play. He's a huge target for inner conflict. So usually between him and the Battle Beetle, they're kind of competing for which targets of which removals and counter spells. Lastly, I like to put this one in there just to scare the crap out of my opponent. As Argus Herald of Doom, I only have one copy of it in there, and he's a beast. This is a he. A 12 drop with flight 5/5. At the start of my turn, reveal him from my hand, and he gets permanent cost -1. I love having him in my opening hand, and this is just a ticking clock for the opponent. So he's kind of in there, and it's nice if you get him late in the game, and I've got all the ramp involved. I can usually drop him the first or second time I've got him in my hand. So I round him out with 23 resources, 15 wild, and 8 blood. So this should be a pretty good, solid mix of resources. I kind of am anxious a little bit about the number of blood shards we have in here, only because 3 of my 4 blood cards require dual threshold, so we should be okay though. Next couple of videos we'll be practicing this deck against AI opponents, and then from there we'll practice against live opponents.